Emily opened her mailbox expecting the usual bills and junk mail. Instead, she found a letter that had been mailed 30 years earlier. And inside that letter was a confession about the night she was born, a secret someone had tried to hide for decades. Before we get into this unbelievable story, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and stay until the very end, because the truth behind this letter will leave you completely shocked. Then Emily read the first line. And everything she believed about her family began to fall apart. Emily Parker ripped open the envelope before she even finished stepping into her apartment. "Why is this so old?" she muttered. The paper crackled in her hands like it might fall apart if she breathed too hard. The envelope was yellow, worn, and the edges were frayed as if it had traveled through time before reaching her mailbox. But it wasn't the condition that made her stomach tighten. It was the postmark. 1995. Emily stared at it again. No, that can't be right. She checked the stamp. The faded ink clearly read July 12, 1995. Emily slowly lowered herself onto the couch, the envelope still in her hand. She was 34 years old. That meant this letter had been mailed almost exactly the year she was born. Her heart started beating faster. Who would send me a letter 30 years ago? The handwriting on the envelope was shaky but clear. Emily Parker. Her exact address. But something about it felt strange. The way her name was written looked careful. Almost emotional. Emily ran her fingers across the ink. Then she noticed something else. There was no return address. A quiet uneasiness crept over her. Okay, this is weird. Her apartment was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. She had just gotten home from work, expecting the usual routine, drop her bag, check the mail, maybe call her mom like she usually did on Wednesdays. But now she was staring at something that didn't make sense. Emily carefully slid her finger under the seal and opened the envelope. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper. The paper was just as old as the envelope. Thin. Fragile. Like it had been waiting decades to be opened. She unfolded it slowly. The handwriting inside matched the writing on the envelope. Emily began reading. Her eyebrows slowly pulled together. Then her breathing stopped. The letter began with only one line. Emily, if you are reading this, then the truth has finally reached you. Emily frowned. What truth? She continued reading. Her eyes moved faster now. Then suddenly, her hand froze. Her mouth opened slightly as the next sentence sank in. The people who raised you are not your biological parents. The paper trembled in her hand. No. She whispered the word automatically, like her brain rejected it before she even had time to think. No, that's not funny. Emily looked around her apartment like someone might jump out and laugh. But there was no one there. Just silence. Her eyes moved back to the letter. My name is Margaret Collins. I was a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital the night you were born. Emily blinked slowly. St. Mary's Hospital. That was where she was born. Her mother had told her the story 100 times growing up. How the hospital room smelled like disinfectant. How her father almost fainted during delivery. How her mother cried the moment she first held her. Emily's chest tightened. She read on. For 30 years I have carried a secret that destroyed my peace. I told myself I would forget. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. But guilt is a heavy thing to carry, Emily. Emily leaned back against the couch. Her mind felt foggy. What is this? Her voice sounded small in the empty room. The letter continued. 2 baby girls were born at St. Mary's Hospital on the night of June 3, 1991. One belonged to a wealthy family who had been trying for years to have a child. The other belonged to a young single mother who had no support and no power. Emily felt a strange chill crawl up her arms. Her eyes moved to the next paragraph. And that's when her heart began pounding. The babies were switched. Emily sat completely still. Her brain struggled to process what she was reading. No. The word came out louder this time. That's ridiculous. Her eyes scanned the page again, hoping she had misunderstood. But the words didn't change. They stared back at her. Cold. Final. The wealthy family wanted a healthy baby girl. The hospital administration didn't want trouble. What happened that night was buried quietly, and everyone involved was told to forget it. Emily's breathing grew shallow. Her mind immediately went to her parents. David Parker. Susan Parker. The two people who had raised her with nothing but love her entire life. Her dad who called every Sunday just to ask if she'd eaten. Her mom who still mailed her birthday cards even though Emily lived 10 minutes away. No, Emily said again. This is crazy. She looked at the bottom of the letter. The nurse had signed her name. Margaret Collins. Emily suddenly stood up and paced across the room. This is insane. Her heart was racing now. This has to be some kind of mistake. She grabbed her phone from the table. For a moment, she thought about calling her mom. But something stopped her. The letter. The way it was written. It didn't feel like a prank. It felt like a confession. Emily turned back to the page. Her eyes landed on the final paragraphs. And the uneasiness inside her chest deepened. I should have spoken up then. But I was young, afraid, and easily silenced by people with power. Emily felt her throat tighten. The woman who gave birth to you never stopped searching for her child. Emily's breath caught. Her name is Sarah Bennett. The name hung in the room like a whisper. Emily had never heard it before. But something about seeing it written there made her stomach twist. The letter continued. The hospital told her the baby died shortly after birth. Emily slowly sank back onto the couch. She thought her baby died. Her voice barely made a sound. But the baby didn't die. Emily's fingers tightened around the paper. That baby grew up believing another family was hers. Emily's chest rose and fell quickly. The next line felt like a hammer striking the floor. That baby was you. Emily shook her head. No. Her voice cracked this time. No, that's not possible. She looked around her apartment again like reality might suddenly snap back into place. But nothing changed. The letter was still in her hand. The words were still there. And her entire life suddenly felt unstable. Emily whispered softly. My parents are my parents. The word sounded more like a question than a statement. Her eyes moved to the final lines. I don't know if Sarah Bennett is still alive. Emily swallowed. But if she is, she deserves to know the truth. At the very bottom of the page was something else. An address. Emily stared at it for a long moment. A small town about 2 hours away. Her heart pounded harder. She folded the letter slowly. Then unfolded it again. As if reading it again might somehow change the outcome. But the words remained the same. The silence in her apartment felt heavier now. Emily whispered to herself. What if this is real? The thought made her stomach twist. Because if it was real, then everything she believed about her life, about her family, about who she was a lie. And somewhere out there might be a woman named Sarah Bennett who had spent 30 years believing her baby had died. While that baby was sitting right here on a couch in Boston, holding a letter that had arrived 3 decades too late. Emily closed her eyes. Her heart was racing so loudly she could hear it. Then she whispered something she never imagined she would say. I need to know the truth. Emily barely slept that night. The letter sat on the kitchen table like it had a heartbeat of its own. Every time she tried to close her eyes, the words came back. The people who raised you are not your biological parents. At 2:14 a.m., she turned on the kitchen light and stared at the letter again. This is insane, she whispered. But something inside her refused to throw it away. If it was a lie, it was a very specific one. The hospital name. The birth date. The nurse's signature. And the address at the bottom. Emily rubbed her temples. Her first instinct had been to call her mother. But what would she say? Hey Mom, did the hospital switch me at birth? Her chest tightened just imagining the conversation. No, she said quietly to herself. I need proof first. The next morning, Emily called in sick to work. She opened her laptop at the kitchen table and typed slowly. St. Mary's Hospital, Boston, 1991 scandal. At first, nothing unusual appeared. Just hospital history, medical directories, and old articles. Emily exhaled slowly. See, she muttered. Probably fake. But something told her not to stop. She typed again. St. Mary's Hospital lawsuit, 1990s. This time, an old archive news page appeared. Emily leaned closer to the screen. Her heart skipped. The article headline read, Medical records missing in St. Mary's Hospital investigation. Her fingers froze over the keyboard. Wait, what? She clicked the article. It was from 1996. The article explained that several families had filed complaints against the hospital after inconsistencies were discovered in newborn medical records. Emily's chest tightened. She kept reading. Some records from the maternity ward between 1990 and 1992 had been lost or altered. The hospital denied wrongdoing. But investigations were launched. Emily leaned back slowly. This can't be a coincidence. Her eyes went back to the letter. 2 baby girls were born the night you were born. Her breathing grew uneven. Okay. She stood up and paced across the apartment. Think. Her parents had never mentioned anything strange about her birth. Never. Her childhood had been normal. Happy. But what if they didn't know? The thought made her stop walking. What if they had no idea? Her mind was racing now. She grabbed the letter again and read the nurse's name. Margaret Collins. Emily quickly searched the name. Several results appeared. Most were unrelated. Then one caught her attention. An obituary. Emily hesitated before clicking it. Her stomach twisted as the page opened. The photo showed an elderly woman with kind eyes. Margaret Collins. Former nurse at St. Mary's Hospital. Died 3 months ago. Emily swallowed hard. So she's gone. Her eyes scanned the obituary. Margaret had worked at St. Mary's from 1988 until 1997. Emily felt her pulse quicken. That lines up. Her gaze dropped to the date again. 3 months ago. The letter suddenly made sense. She wrote it before she died. Emily felt a strange sadness settle in her chest. The nurse had carried this secret for 30 years. Then tried to fix it at the very end. Emily whispered softly. Why send it now? Her eyes returned to the final line of the letter. The address. Sarah Bennett. Emily typed the name slowly into the search bar. Several results appeared. Most were social media profiles scattered across the country. But one stood out. A small-town directory listing. Sarah Bennett, Riverside, Massachusetts. Emily leaned closer. That town was exactly where the letter's address pointed. Her heart started beating faster again. No way. Her brain tried to slow things down. Wait. It could just be someone with the same name. But the more she stared at the address, the more something inside her pulled toward it. Emily checked the map. 2 hours away. She closed her laptop slowly. Her mind was spinning. Okay, if this is real. Her voice trembled slightly. Then that woman might be my biological mother. The words felt strange leaving her mouth. Her real mother. Emily shook her head. No. My mom is Susan Parker. She said the name firmly. But doubt had already entered her thoughts. The letter said the hospital told Sarah Bennett her baby had died. Emily stared at the address again. If she believes that. Her voice softened. Then she has no idea I exist. The thought made her chest ache unexpectedly. 30 years. 30 years believing your child was gone. Emily grabbed her phone. Her finger hovered over her mom's contact. Call her, she whispered to herself. Just ask. But the moment she imagined hearing her mother's voice, her courage disappeared. What if the letter was true? What if asking the question broke something between them forever? Emily lowered the phone slowly. I need to see this woman first. She said it quietly. But once the decision formed, it felt impossible to ignore. Emily grabbed her keys from the counter. Then she stopped. Her heart pounded again. What am I doing? She laughed nervously. I'm about to drive 2 hours because of a 30-year-old letter from a dead nurse. She looked at the paper again. The ink. The trembling handwriting. The guilt woven into every sentence. It didn't feel like a lie. Emily whispered again. I just need answers. The drive out of Boston felt longer than usual. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than normal. Every mile seemed to carry a new thought. A new fear. What if the letter was wrong? What if she showed up at some stranger's house looking insane? Or worse. What if the letter was right? Emily imagined the conversation with her parents. Her father's confused face. Her mother's hurt voice. Emily, what are you talking about? Her chest tightened. I can't do that to them unless I'm sure. The highway stretched endlessly in front of her. Her mind replayed childhood memories. Birthday parties. School graduations. Her father teaching her how to ride a bike. Her mother reading stories before bed. Those memories are real, Emily whispered. They have to be. But the letter kept whispering something else. The babies were switched. Emily exhaled slowly. Her GPS voice interrupted her thoughts. Turn right in 200 feet. The quiet town of Riverside appeared soon after. Small houses. Tree-lined streets. A calmness that felt almost unreal compared to the chaos inside her mind. Emily slowed the car as she approached the address written on the letter. Her stomach flipped. The house was small. White paint slightly faded. Flowers growing along the front walkway. It looked peaceful. Emily parked across the street. Her hands suddenly felt cold. What if she's not even here? What if she moved? What if she never existed? Emily stared at the house for a long moment. Then she saw movement behind the curtain. Someone was inside. Her heart jumped into her throat. Emily swallowed hard. This is it. She stepped out of the car. The air felt strangely quiet. Every step toward the front door felt heavier. Her mind screamed for her to turn around. But her feet kept moving. Emily stood on the porch. The wooden boards creaked slightly under her weight. She stared at the door. Her hand hovered near the doorbell. What am I going to say? She whispered to herself. Hi. I might be your daughter. The thought made her laugh nervously. But the laughter quickly faded. Her heart pounded louder than ever. Finally, she pressed the doorbell. The sound echoed inside the house. Emily's breath caught. Footsteps approached slowly. Her pulse raced. The door handle turned. The door opened. A woman in her early 60s stood there. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The woman stared at Emily. Emily stared back. Something strange passed between them. Something neither of them understood yet. The woman's eyes slowly widened. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Emily?" Emily froze. "How do you know my name?" The woman covered her mouth. Tears suddenly filled her eyes. Emily stood frozen on the porch. The woman in front of her was crying quietly, her hands trembling as she stared at Emily's face. Emily's voice came out shaky. I think there's been a mistake." The woman shook her head slowly. "No," she whispered. "There hasn't." Emily's heart pounded. "How do you know my name?" The woman wiped her eyes, trying to steady herself. "My name is Sarah Bennett," she said softly. The name hit Emily like a wave. Her fingers tightened around the folded letter in her pocket. Sarah took another careful step closer, still studying Emily's face like she was trying to memorize every detail. "You look just like the photo I imagined for 30 years, Sarah whispered. Emily blinked. "Imagined?" Sarah nodded slowly. "They told me my baby died." Emily felt her stomach twist. "But a mother knows," Sarah continued, her voice breaking. "I never believed them." Emily swallowed hard. The porch suddenly felt too small, too quiet. "Can we talk inside?" Sarah asked gently. Emily hesitated. Everything in her life suddenly felt uncertain. But something about Sarah's voice carried a quiet sincerity that made it impossible to walk away. Emily nodded slowly. "Okay." Sarah stepped aside, letting her in. The house was simple. Warm. Family photos lined the walls. Emily's eyes scanned them unconsciously. Children. Birthdays. Graduations. But none of them were her. Sarah noticed where Emily was looking. Her voice softened. "I never had another child." Emily turned toward her. "Why?" Sarah's lips trembled. "Because I never stopped looking for the one they took." Emily felt a sharp ache in her chest. Sarah sat down at the kitchen table and gestured for Emily to sit. For a moment neither of them spoke. Then Emily finally pulled the letter from her pocket. "I got this yesterday." Sarah stared at the paper. "Margaret Collins," she whispered when she saw the signature. "You knew her?" Emily asked. Sarah nodded slowly. "She was one of the nurses that night." Sarah reached across the table gently. "I won't force anything, Emily." Emily looked at her. "I just want the truth," Sarah continued softly. "Even if it hurts." Emily felt a lump form in her throat. "I want the truth too." 3 days later, Emily sat in her apartment staring at her phone. The DNA test results had arrived. Her hands felt cold. Her phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. "Did you get the results?" Emily typed slowly. "Yes." A few seconds passed. Then Sarah replied. "I'm afraid to open mine." Emily felt the same fear. Her entire identity sat inside that email. Everything she believed about her life. Her family. Her name. Emily whispered softly. "Okay." Then she opened the message. Her eyes scanned the words quickly. Then stopped. Her breath left her lungs. 99.98% biological match. Emily covered her mouth. Oh my God. Tears filled her eyes instantly. Across town, Sarah's phone rang. Emily answered immediately. Neither of them spoke for a few seconds. Then Sarah's shaky voice came through. Emily? Emily wiped her eyes. It's true. Sarah began crying on the other end of the line. My baby, she whispered through tears. My baby is alive. Emily felt her own tears fall. I don't know what to do, she admitted. Sarah's voice softened. You don't have to choose anything right now. Emily exhaled slowly. I have to tell my parents. The words felt heavy. Sarah was quiet for a moment. I understand. That evening, Emily sat across from David and Susan Parker at their kitchen table. Her father looked confused. Emily, what's wrong? Her mother leaned forward with concern. You sounded upset on the phone. Emily's heart pounded. I need to ask you something. They exchanged worried glances. Of course, Susan said gently. Emily took a deep breath. Did anything unusual happen the night I was born? The question hung in the air. David frowned slightly. No. Susan looked confused. Why would you ask that? Emily pulled the letter from her bag and placed it on the table. I received this. Her parents read silently. Their expressions slowly changed. Confusion. Shock. Then something else. Fear. Emily noticed immediately. You knew something, she whispered. David ran a hand through his hair. Emily. Susan's eyes filled with tears. We didn't know for sure, she said softly. Emily felt the room spin slightly. What do you mean? Susan took a shaky breath. The hospital called us 2 days after you were born. Emily leaned forward. What did they say? David's voice was quiet. They said there had been a mix-up with the babies. Emily's heart stopped. But they assured us everything had been corrected, Susan continued. They told us not to worry. Emily's voice trembled. And you believed them? David nodded slowly. What else could we do? Susan reached across the table. We loved you from the moment we saw you. Emily's tears fell again. You are our daughter, Susan whispered. No matter what that letter says. Emily wiped her face. I know. Her voice cracked. But there's someone else who's been searching for her daughter for 30 years. David and Susan exchanged a long glance. Finally David spoke. Then maybe it's time the truth finally came out. Weeks later, the story exploded across the news. Investigations reopened. Former staff from St. Mary's Hospital were questioned. And the hidden baby switch scandal that had been buried for decades finally surfaced. Emily stood between two families now. The one that raised her. And the one that had lost her. But for the first time in her life, she knew the truth. And it had all started with a single envelope. A letter that had traveled through time. A confession that refused to stay buried. A message that arrived 30 years too late. But just in time to change everything. And if this story shocked you as much as it shocked Emily, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments. What would you do if you received a letter that revealed your entire life was built on a secret? Because sometimes, the truth waits decades to be discovered. But when it finally arrives, it changes everything.